Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we're back with another innovator interview. And, as the world deals with more extreme heat, flooding, and drought associated with climate change, it's easy to forget about the many other environmentally harmful activities that are contributing to planetary damage. Feldman and Bridget Gustafson, our guests today, started Herbicide-Free Campus. It's a student organization that fights the use of glyphosate, the main ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup herbicide. They started Herbicide-Free Campus in 2017 when their volleyball team realized that the practice grounds where they worked out were being sprayed with Roundup on a daily basis or frequently. And they offered to weed the grounds in exchange for the UC Berkeley ground staff stopping the use of the herbicide near the practice area. That step led to a growing national movement that has stopped the use of glyphosate at college campuses and public school campuses around the country. It's an example of the power of small actions, and we're pleased to have Mackenzie and Bridget with us to talk about Herbicide-Free Campus today. And you should also check out the article that they wrote for Earth911. We'll include a link on the article that goes with this podcast. They explained the genesis of the organization and some of the key learnings that they bring to the advocacy efforts that they are doing. You can also learn about Herbicide-Free Campus at herbicide-freecampus.org. Welcome to the show, Mackenzie and Bridget. How are you today?
Hi, Mitch. Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, Mitch. Thank you so much. We're happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here to talk about this. Now, what I'd love to try to understand in this conversation is how did you start the organization Herbicide-Free Campus in the sense that it extended beyond your volleyball team's efforts to make practice safe and started to impact the rest of the campus? What was the next step after you made that first offer?
Yeah, I'll let Bridget take this one to explain the origin, but just wanted to make a quick note before we go forward. We're focused on eliminating all synthetic herbicides from campuses, not just glyphosate. And I think it's important to note because it's easy to get focused on one chemical. And the problem is when we get too focused on banning one chemical, then it's just replaced with another chemical, which is sometimes even more harmful. And so we really need to, we were happy with, the University of California banning glyphosate, but for us, we see it as just one step, and we're really pushing them to go completely organic.
That's a great point.
So I just wanted to note that. And Bridget, I'll let you take it away with the origin.
Thank you. You spoke about how we got herbicides banned from our courts by having our teammates come out and pick the weeds. And that was an agreement that we had with the groundskeepers, that were taking care of the area surrounding our volleyball courts. Mm-hmm. And so, after that, we had our first little weeding day, and then Mackenzie and I just kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, what's next? We did that, and we got to have this collaborative effort with the groundskeepers. And it's not weeds crop up each day. And it was a repeated effort. It was, it's a continuous maintenance work. And so we kind of looked at each other and we're like, all right, let's, who are we going to talk to next? And felt that, we were being exposed to these chemicals because we were spending so much time on these courts, right? Mm-hmm. We were Division I athletes. And so it's 20, 30 hours a week on these courts. And so we thought, what other areas on campus are being most affected or is there the most potential for student and faculty exposure to chemicals? Where do people spend a lot of time outside? And that led us to Memorial Glade, which on UC Berkeley's campus is the equivalent of, the quad or area where people are just playing Frisbee and all that stuff. And so we tracked down and began to develop a relationship with the groundskeeper who took care of that area.
You started at the grassroots, not to make a pun, but you went out there and started to talk about this issue with the people who were applying the herbicides rather than going to the administration.
Right. Because we knew that ultimately the decision or the actual action that we wanted to be changed was going to come from the groundskeepers. Right. It wasn't necessarily going to come from, the pressure might come from the administration, but the actual change was going to come from the groundskeepers.
So I guess there's two questions that come from that. One is, did you have to explain to the groundskeepers what they were being exposed to in order to help them understand the impact on the students of the use of herbicides? And how has herbicide use changed at Berkeley as a result?
Yeah, we were lucky because the grounds manager, Theron, that we had to go to, he was already pretty receptive to this idea because he had attended an organic training prior to us meeting him with this specialist named Chip. So he was already thinking about, he was already aware that these chemicals are not the safest and what is he exposing his guys to. So he was looking to change, but also when you're super short staffed and you're overworked and underpaid, sometimes it's maybe in the back of your mind, but it's not the thing you're going to go out and do the next day. And so when we came across him, we were lucky because he was already thinking about this idea. And because so after the day at the beach volleyball court, I wrote an article in the student paper, and it got a lot of interest from community members and students, and made me and Bridget feel validated because we realized this is an issue that it's not something that just the two of us care about. This is something that, a lot of people care about. Even community members who aren't attending the school, they realize that if universities can make this change, it could have ripple effects in their community and in other schools, and in other communities across the country. So we realized that this was an issue that, was really worth fighting for. And so someone who had read the article reached out to us and offered us a grant to bring in this organic guru named Chip, the same one that Theron had went to a workshop with before. So when we met with Theron, we said, we came with this resource of sign these papers and we can do this, get this grant, and an organic specialist can come and transition Memorial Glade and Faculty Glade, our biggest green spaces on campus, to organic. And so we did that, and building the relationship with him wasn't easy at first. I think when we first reached out, we were talking about the toxicity of these chemicals, and we were, upset that students are being exposed to this. And Bridget had the idea of maybe we should, change the way that we're approaching this, and we should really be grateful for him working on the landscape every day and see what we can do from there. So that really was important. And I think the reason we work with the groundskeepers, and that's such a huge part of our mission, is because, we could change policy just by going to the president, but the groundskeepers are the ones that are the most affected. They're the ones, that are the most exposed. And it's not fair if the policy just changes and nobody even tried to talk to them. And then they're just doing more work. And it is more work. Now, after glyphosate was banned, Theron and his people, they do physical training now because they're having to bend over more, and they got foam rollers and they stretch before every day. So it's really cool, some of the things that came out of it, but it is more manual labor. So
you established common cause with them too, though. Yeah,
we did. And so we got this grant, and these people, all of his crew was trained on these organic management practices like aeration and compost tea and overseeding and these holistic practices, because it really is not just a product swap. It's really about holistically changing your idea of how to manage things. And it's like changing your body, of not just, taking a medicine, but like really incorporating healthy habits into your life. And that's sort of the same way to look at landscape. And then we started planning weeding days with him and getting professors to give extra credit for students to come out and do weeding days. So we had these weeding days going on at the same time that this pilot project was going on. And now the campus, pretty much the entire campus has eliminated the herbicides, with just a few exceptions once in a while.
That's an impressive result after 4 years. Now, in the article that you shared on Earth911, you talked about what they're doing at HSC, Loyola, Marymount, Grinnell College, Emory University. How did these connections to other universities start up? Was it partly a function of that grant you mentioned a moment ago?
It really came, we didn't mention this in the article, the trial of Lee Johnson versus Monsanto. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
The groundskeeper who sued because he developed Parkinson's. Or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, excuse me.
Exactly. So that was going on in the summer of 2018. So I had graduated. Bridget was still at UC Berkeley because she's a few years younger. So she was leading the campaign there, and we really didn't have any plans to continue it, expand it rather past UC Berkeley. It was just Bridget was going to lead it and pass it down at that school. But then the trial happened, and I went to the trial because I was really interested in this. And, nobody ever really goes up against Monsanto. It just seems crazy. So when I was sitting there, it kind of hit me that this was a huge issue. And if this person won, whether or not this person won, this issue is becoming more mainstream. People are talking about herbicides. This is encouraging other people who are sick from potentially the use of herbicides to kind of question what they're using. And it generated a lot of interest. And once Lee Johnson won the case, it was, even prior to that, we had students reaching out to us from other schools who had heard about what we were doing, and they were interested in bringing this campaign to their college. I think just hearing about it from, I would, go to speak sometimes at different schools, or just from articles that we would write, and just talking about it. And so people were hearing about it. And after the trial, I think it became clear that we needed to expand this beyond just UC Berkeley. Because there was groundskeepers, students, staff, faculty at campuses all over the country that were being exposed to chemicals. And so, the idea just started from there.
Okay. So, Bridget, you were there longer at Berkeley, and the program is in its 5th year. Why did both of you stay involved, and how are you staying involved now that you're not students at Berkeley?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was really a beautiful process watching the campaign grow at Berkeley and getting to spend, the 4 years that I was a student there partaking in it. I think probably well aware the lives of college students are very temporal, and, there's just, you're trying to do new things every year. And so to get to really build this all 4 years was really special, and also allowed for me to, experience many different roadblocks and challenges, and come up against whatever the year might have brought. So what my capacity is now within the organization is a campus coach.
Okay.
And so what that means is we have this 12-month-long fellowship program for college students looking to bring this sort of campaign to their campus. And there is me and another campus coach who also, had an herbicide-free campaign on their campus at UC Santa Barbara. And what we do is just provide very close support for students. So we meet every 2 weeks. We strategize with the students, and they'll come to us with the roadblocks they've hit, like I can't get in touch with my groundskeeper. And then, the other campus coach and I are like, okay, well, when we were students, like we did this to try to get it, so based on our own organizing experience, we're trying to help facilitate this campaign at other campuses, and also learning all along the way with the students that we're trying to mentor.
Now, is Herbicide-Free Campus a nonprofit that operates this network, or is it really just a grassroots organization that transcends local boundaries?
Yeah, we're not our own 501c3, but we have a fiscal sponsor, so we operate as a nonprofit.
Let me ask this. Now, you already clarified that this is really not just about glyphosate, but that was the catalyst. Is it effective in order to get people involved in the conversation to focus on one issue and get them to understand, for instance, the relationship between glyphosate and cancer? Or is it important to bring in more topics in order to activate more people's concerns? A lot of people know about Roundup, but may not know about the consequences of herbicide-based monoculture on soil health, for instance. Did you find that the conversation needed to widen in order to bring more people into it, or was a singular focus enough to get them activated?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think that glyphosate has been an access point for us. And if you think about, in the 70s when Rachel Carson's Silent Spring came out, and, DDT was suddenly now exposed as this very dangerous chemical. And that it feels like almost like a resurgence of that with glyphosate. And so I almost feel like it's becoming more in the public consciousness that this glyphosate chemical is dangerous. And so that is the access point. And then from there, we can widen it out. Like, I think it's, this area, despite the fact that herbicides are used, right, in the billions of pounds every year, it still somehow feels a little bit niche, just because it's not within the public discussion very much. And so we take that issue of glyphosate, and then from there kind of run and try to expand from there and let people know, like, hey, this isn't the only chemical. Yes, it is the most widely used, but it is neither the only one or the most dangerous. There are other chemicals with higher toxicity that are still being used in agriculture and landscaping quite commonly. So,
well, and that's an important point, and it's one that Mackenzie, you raised at the beginning of the conversation, that we can just swap out another chemical, and then it takes 10 years to figure out that one is bad for us, and then get that message out for another 10 years, and then something else gets swapped out for that. So Bayer has pledged to stop selling glyphosate for U.S. household use in 2023, but it doesn't appear to be stopping selling it for agricultural use in the U.S. or around the world. What can we do to extend your success at the campus level in terms of awareness of herbicides as a health threat? And Mackenzie, I'll ask you that question.
Yeah, I mean, we got to take it up to the EPA. And I know we just saw earlier, a few days ago that the EPA finally is banning chlorpyrifos. And that took a long time and a lot of research. And, unfortunately, we're not like Europe with the precautionary principle where the burden is on the companies to prove this chemical safe, right? It's like they're out on the market, and then we have to prove that they're dangerous in order to remove them. And I think there's a lot of science on chlorpyrifos, and I think one day the same will happen for glyphosate. But it's also a lot of farming policies. I mean, this really is also about changing the farm bill, because at this moment, like you mentioned with monoculture, it's really hard for farmers to be farming large scale and, trying to do practices like no-till and all these things, and also not be expected to spray herbicides. And of course, we need to ban all of them for the sake of their health, for anybody who eats food, for the health of the planet. But I think it can't just be the toxins people working in silos going to the EPA without thinking about the farmers in mind. It has to be farmers themselves. It has to be, people who are knowledgeable about the farming system, and really working together to come up with practices and ways for farmers to benefit by slowly transitioning to regenerative organic agriculture, and being able to get rewarded for that and have this sort of grace period in that transition, because as we know, it is tough, and there are years of learning as you're transitioning away from the use of chemicals.
Now, the problem is that we face an onslaught of new technologies and chemicals all the time, and of course there are really active farming communities engaging in regenerative agriculture and so forth. But you're talking about a kind of an umbrella conversation that we need to be having about changing our entire lifestyle and thinking about the way that we produce our food, consume our food, and manage the waste from all the food as well. Because if that goes back in the ground, it is a much better outcome than if it ends up in a landfill. What resources and sites do you recommend our listeners take a look at in order to understand the herbicide issue, toxins in general, and to get information and, most importantly, connect with one another? And in your article, you mentioned non-toxic communities and Pesticide Action Network, for instance. Tell us about those.
Yeah, I would say if you want more information on pesticides, you can come to our website, reach out to us. We can give you a toolkit on how to to get involved in your own community, whether you're a student or a community member. So definitely come and talk to us. Beyond Pesticides, Pesticide Action Network, and Non-Toxic Communities, they all have great resources on their websites as well on the dangers of these chemicals and on, small things that you can do in your community. But also Pesticide Action Network works with, in legislation, and they're always talking about policies, so you can look and support it. And to your earlier question, when I was talking about those big, this is a big systems change. That's not to say that everyday people can't plug into that. So just sort of more on the broader level, there's groups like National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, National Young Farmers Coalition. Those are groups that have more of the Farm Bill policies to be paying attention to. And there's absolutely ways that we can take those policies and, tell our legislators to support it. And with the new Farm Bill coming up in 2023, I think we have a little bit of time, but we all need to be, starting to become aware of it. And I actually have my own podcast called Agenda 23 about the Farm Bill and like how everyday people can plug it. And so you can check that out. But yeah, I would say those are some resources to be looking into.
Fantastic. Now, let me bring it back down to the person who is starting out in college and wants to get involved or is looking at their community's use of herbicides. What do you suggest they do first? And I want to wrap up on that question. So how do our listeners just take their first step? Bridget, how about you? Can you share that idea?
Yeah, I would say the first step would be talking to your groundskeeper. There's a lot of speculative work that can be done, and there's a lot of,
you just walk up and say hi. Would you literally
that is essentially what we did. I would suggest the early morning because oftentimes groundskeepers are, that is the time slot of their work because it's a commonly held belief in higher education that when groundskeepers do their work, it could be distracting to the students. So you're just supposed to see like this pristine campus and not know who's behind the work. So either early morning or if you're trying to meet in person, or oftentimes the faculty management or facilities management or grounds team will have a space on your campus's website where you can go and contact them. And if you, on Herbicide-Free Campus on our website, or if you email us, we have email templates that we provide for all of our students, for your first introductory email. What kind of verbiage you want to use, you want to have a very friendly attitude. So we have email templates that we can send out to anybody interested and just begin the conversation, right? You have to know what is being sprayed and applied on your campus before you begin this work.
Okay, so a little information collection too, just to orient yourself to the issue that you're going to fight.
Exactly. Having, the actual concrete information is what is going to allow you to truly progress.
Mackenzie, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, and I would say at the same time, once you know that this is an issue on your campus, you always want to be bringing in students. And sometimes our students want to wait until the campaign is more fully formed before they're bringing in people. But we say, in order to make a campaign fully formed, you have to always be bringing in people. And there's always going to be jobs to do, whether it's like working with the student government and passing a resolution or connecting with different clubs on campus and organizing weeding days, pushing higher up policy. There's always jobs for students to do. And so we always say, spread the word to everybody, recruit in students, because it is going to take a movement. Even when your groundskeepers are supportive, they might not be. Either way, it's going to take a lot of students who care about this to make change. And so grab your friend and start talking about this issue with them.
Well, I want to thank both of you for spending some time with us today, but mostly for taking the time to start a Herbicide-Free Campus. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
We've been talking with Mackenzie Feldman and Bridget Gustafson. They're the co-founders of Herbicide-Free Campus at the University of California, Berkeley, but of course it's spread across the country. Check them out at herbicide-free-campus.org. That's all one long word, no dashes or anything, herbicide-free-campus.org. And of course, take a look at their article on Earth911. It's called Herbicide-Free Campus, the Student-Led Environmental Advocacy Movement. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. But in the meantime, let me ask you to take a few minutes to share this podcast with your friends, particularly if you have friends who are starting out in college. Get this idea out. Let's activate this grassroots movement to prevent the use of herbicides, and particularly glyphosate, which is a terribly dangerous material, at our campuses across the country, including our high schools and elementary schools. This is an important issue. We'll be back with another episode soon. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. Have a green day. And folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. We'll see you soon.